All right, folks. Well, welcome to the living room, and I am here with a good friend of mine, someone who's been a mentor and a coach to me for the last several years. His name is Bradley Grinnen. Brad has a background in ministry and in nonprofit work, but currently serves Fortune 500 executives as a life coach, and he also helps new coaches get their businesses up off the ground, and not only from a functional, here are the tasks you need to accomplish, but also from a mindset standpoint, and how to embrace that identity as someone who has something to offer to the world, and to help others through the coaching profession. So I thought Brad would be great to talk to you for a few minutes today about what does it take to actually change. What does it take to turn from the counterfeit to receive the real? What are some practical steps that we can take? So, Brad, I just first of all, thanks for being with the good people at King of Kings Lutheran Church in Lake Orion, Michigan, and would love to just kick off a little bit if you could share maybe a little bit about your background and how that background informed your sense of self and your identity, and the ways in which that was maybe counterfeit to who you are today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric. And it's a privilege always to as soon as you were like, "Hey, can we chat?" I was like, "Well, yeah," because it means I get to hang out with you. So I grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania. I come from a long line of oil truck drivers in trailer parks, and that's kind of my heritage. And I grew up in a pretty conservative evangelical faith tradition. And it was actually in that faith tradition that I felt this calling when I was 15 of, hey, I want you to be available to make a difference in the world, in people's lives, for me. And that for me was God's voice in my head. Whatever that sounds like, it sounds a lot like my voice. So that's pretty self-serving. But it was just this pull, and I knew. So I went, my undergrad and my grad work was all in religion and divinity. And I became a minister, eventually became a minister, a pastor for about 20 years. And then transitioned into life coaching, and then working specifically with Fortune 500 executives, and not that different, honestly, in terms of just still wanting to make an impact and help people in their lives. So, but that kind of gives you a background of where I come from in terms of, you're talking about shaping identity, forming identity. I did, and then you asked the question, why make change in your life, in my life? How did that come about? And the reality is I didn't realize that there were changes that I needed to make for the longest time. I think until I was looking around at my life and thinking, I don't like it. I'm not fulfilled. I feel like I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, and yet things aren't working out the way I want them to. And I realized I had maybe some thought patterns and some behavioral patterns and some emotional patterns that were formed in me from a young age that weren't serving myself or other people. And so that was that's a long road to even come to that conclusion. And then not as long of a road to make change. So I'll start there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Because could you give an example of a thought pattern, or an emotional pattern, or even a behavioral pattern that you gained the awareness that this is not serving me, this is maybe counterfeit to who I really am, and sort of maybe what caused that awakening?
Yeah, let's start with what caused it. Let me start with your last question, then I'll move into the first. What caused all of those patterns and I'm not special or unique. I think this is the same for all of us. I had a massive amount of insecurities and limiting beliefs caused by, I'll choose to use the word trauma, when I was younger. And I don't necessarily have to define that. I hesitate to define it for people because I don't want people to, what happens is I'll define it, and then wherever you are on the spectrum of having traumatic experiences in your life, and listen, I'm 50. So if you get, I think if you get to 30, if you don't have, if you don't believe you got some traumatic experiences that happened in your life, you're lying to yourself.
Totally.
So, but the reason why I hesitate to like get into specifics and define it is because then some people, a little bit on one side will say, oh, well, that's worse than anything I've experienced, so I must not
Right.
have trauma. Or other people will say, oh, well, that's nothing. And so it becomes useless and not helpful for people. But
Right.
yeah, so just
Your
from some,
trauma is your trauma, regardless of how it
it's
compares to other people.
really subjective. And you
Yeah.
take somebody, two different people from different places in the world with maybe dramatically different levels of intensity. Pain is pain. And so if it's the most pain you felt, it's still the most pain you felt.
Hmm.
And so I developed some patterns to protect myself based around some of the insecurities I had about myself. And it took me a long time to realize how much I really didn't like myself.
Mm.
Um, Specifically, this was formed by my early faith tradition. I am a very spiritual person and always have been. So even as a kid, I remember 6 years old, in this classroom with a felt board, and this teacher presenting and basically saying, hey, if you don't want to go to hell and burn for eternity, you need to accept Jesus. And I just remember being like, that's a good deal. Can I
Right.
get in on that? Right. But it was still a real genuine experience for me of, yeah, okay, Jesus sounds good. God, yep, sounds good. Makes sense. But, from my faith tradition, it's, the more human you are, the more despicable you are, the
Mm.
more of a worm you are, the more, how badly we need saving. And I don't mock that language, but within the very local church that I was very involved in, that was just the underpinning. I mean, we're start from go, I'm a bad person and I need to be saved. And so I really took that to heart. There's nothing good in me. The only thing that's good comes from God. Um, and that's because we had started from, and I won't get too biblically hermeneutic in this, but we always started with Genesis 3 after the fall. Like,
Mhm.
I rarely remember reading about God creating humanity and then repeating, and it was good, and God created the sun and pierced the darkness, and it was good, and formed land mass, and it was good, in this beautiful poetry. uh and it was good, and it was good, and it was good, and it was good. I'm like, where was that when I was a kid?
Right.
So that really, like, that can't be overstated what an effect that had on me. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, I wasn't very athletic. I was extremely shy and introverted. Like, I was just between my dad's legs when I was a munchkin. I was always a little
Mm.
kid. It wasn't until I was like 25, that I actually like put on mass, and people are like, how'd you get big? I'm like, "Oh, my metabolism stopped." And so, like, I would hide all the time. I never, all my friends were always better at sports, which is the fun thing we did. I still had fun, but I just remember somehow learning, and there's lots of detail to it, but I remember learning it's not okay for people to see me the way I see me.
Mm.
But a better way to put that is, because I didn't have that level of awareness, a better way to put it, it's not okay for people to see me for who I am, because they won't like me.
Mm.
And it's
Yeah.
just a natural correlation in your nervous system to they won't like me, to then I'll get kicked out of the tribe, to then I'll be alone, to then I'll be dead. But it's
Right.
literally where I went all the time.
Yeah.
And so that core identity, I didn't like myself. I always wished I was somebody else. I was always comparing myself to other people. And so a lot of it was just self-preservation,
Hmm.
not from anything necessarily real, just
Yeah.
from the thought patterns, and which then um, influence my behavioral patterns. Okay, so I can't say what I really like. I can't say what I really don't like. Let me feel the temperature of this room. What should I like so everyone likes me? What should I like so I'm accepted? What do I do? What do I say? How do I move? How do I dress so that people will just like me and accept me? And then just constantly dancing. And the closest metaphor I can give would be maybe social media today.
Hmm.
You know, how do I need to behave? What do I need to believe? Not me necessarily now, but like, you, what do I have to say politically to be accepted in the tribe I'm in? What do I have to look like to be accepted in the tribe I'm in? What do I have to believe in? And and so yeah, that was just me creating a bunch of,
Yeah.
this is who I am. Please like me. Do you like me? Do you like
Right.
me? Do you like me?
So if I can maybe distill that down, so you were raised in a tribe, where if you tell people enough times that they're bad, they're going to believe that they're bad,
100%.
right? And
Yep.
then so that's the message you hear, and so then it's I'm bad, and it's I want to be seen as good, so I have to construct an identity that other people will look at and say Brad is good. And so, well, what is that? And so then, going to search and
Yeah.
seeing what was working, what didn't, all the while denying the good that God had put in you intentionally to benefit the world, uh, because it had been drilled into your head that really no, there wasn't anything good within you.
Yeah. I would
And
I would accidentally tap into that greatness
mhm,
to, usually
right,
in the service of other people. But it wasn't even, that's all accurate. And the real driving force was, the only reason I'd want you to think I'm good is just so you like me.
right,
So there's that, with the added layer of some actual traumatic experiences from other people that I
hmm,
trusted as a young child, that just felt like I've got to go, I've got to protect myself. If people
hmm,
like me, I'll be okay. Like, the only thing I was good at was getting along with people, so I tried to master it,
yeah,
and that played out in every area of my life. To answer then your first question, well, what are one of those patterns that you realized? I remember with my ex-wife, it was my wife at the time, and we were going to marriage counseling, and I remember I had journaled that morning, and we got there, and I had written out, it was just, it was a revelation to me what I had written out. And it's the first time I realized, if I show you if you truly see me for who I am, you will leave me, was my
mm,
fear. And that was just a base
ah,
underlying fear for everybody in my life, except for maybe my father, because my father was, he just was the most loving, compassionate, um, unconditioning man that I've ever known.
hmm,
So I had that going for me,
right,
right? But for everything else, it was just like, but as I've grown up, and I grew up and moved away. And so it's like, yeah, that's in the background, but it's just like, I'm at this job right now. So who do I have to be liked?
yeah. Gosh, I mean, I think that plays out in so many ways, in our world. I mean, we live in it's a upper middle class suburb of Detroit. Everybody is kind of chasing this version of life, that is I got to keep up so that I'm a good parent. Whether it's me knowing I'm a good parent or the people telling me I'm a good parent, but it's based on this performance. I got to do more at my job so I can advance, so I have security, and so I got to be this person. Um, that I think that's all informed, by our past experience.
Yeah.
those traumas. So you're at this place in life where you realize, that I am afraid that if people know who the real me is, they will not love me. And yet that mindset is has created a life for me that I do not like, and so something has to change. And so how did you begin that process of making those changes?
Great question. I'll start by saying I'm still in the process on a pretty daily basis of, the first thing was awareness. When I had that awareness, when I read that, what I had journaled, that just, it's not like it came through me, but it was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had that's going on me. I realized pretty quickly I don't like myself.
Mm.
And so a lot of my behavioral patterns weren't very loving towards myself. Um, and that can play out in a whole bunch of different ways, substance abuse or food abuse, or television abuse, media abuse, whatever it is. It's just my actions weren't very, if I was a friend of myself, I wouldn't like the way I was being talked to by myself, and I wouldn't like
Mm.
the actions towards myself. So that was a whole nother level of awareness that came quickly after that realization that if people saw me for who I really was, nobody would love me. And I realized, oh, I don't love me. And so that just became learning how to accept myself and love myself became my major focus in life.
Mhm.
It just consumed me from, um, you know, ways to neurologically rewire the synaptic nerves in my uh, neural network in my brain, to reinforcing them with just intentional action, and it's as cliche as it sounds. Oh, I need to eat healthy food because that's a very loving thing to do for myself.
Mhm.
Oh, I need to move my body more, even though I don't feel like it and I don't want to now, because it's a very active way to care for myself. Something as base and simple as that, which I think is a great place for everyone to start. Um, and so I started that, consuming books, um, putting little habits, just even the way I would end my day and start my day by the way I talk to myself. I would catch myself talking to myself. Um, like we all do. Don't nobody act like they don't talk to themselves in their head. But how I was responding to myself, becoming more compassionate, allowing myself to have more grace from, oh, I made a mistake. And instead of jumping on myself for the next 3 months, let's fix it. Let's just own it. And then let's do what we can to make reparation. And then, oh, you've done everything you've done. Nothing else you can do, Brad. Let it go.
Yeah.
And so it was a long process with a lot of stuff involved in that, but and one of the things I did was I hired a life coach myself, someone who I had come to trust, and really were living out in their life what it was I wanted to be living out in my life. And I was like, how'd you do that? And so I worked with a coach for several months, which was super helpful. Someone who's just been on the path before and knows where to step, where not to step, and how to help me tap into my own level of self-awareness and awaken within me things that I wasn't even aware I was capable of. So
Yeah. That's good. So there's a couple things that you said that kind of struck me. So it was almost like that moment of shifting, turning from the counterfeit, being able to receive the real, began almost like you stepped outside of yourself and looked at how you were treating yourself, and of there was like this evaluation of, if I was watching someone treat someone else this way, how would I feel about that? It was
right,
it's
yeah,
but it's all you, right? It's you treating yourself this way. But if somebody looked at me and saw me treating myself this way, what would they want to say to me about that, right? Like there was this
yeah,
kind of internal dialogue, about that. And so that was like, all right, well, if other people would not approve of how I was treating myself, then why do I permit it? Why do I approve of how I'm treating myself? Um, yeah, I think, man, that I think that is not the silver bullet, but a silver bullet
It's
of starting to
powerful.
make that change.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool for awareness. It's not easy. You know, coming to terms with these things, it wasn't easy. It was hard. And it's not hard like digging the ditch at 5 a.m. in the morning till
Right.
sundown. But it's honesty with ourselves can be hard. It can
Yeah.
be very difficult when we realize I'm not who I wish I was.
Hmm.
My behaviors and my actions are not something I'm proud of. Um, but it was also simple and easy on the level. It wasn't producing the things in my life that I wanted, like really healthy relationships. I had some healthy relationships, but certainly, you know, not some of the ones that were most important to me. And then there was relationships with some family members, people who were actually responsible for some of my early trauma, and having conversations with, now that I've got this aware, oh, I don't have to please this person anymore. We need to have a conversation. These were things that you did, and I won't be treating myself well if I don't confront you with this conversation. I don't need you to respond in any way. I need to have this conversation with you for me. And so
Hmm.
those things were not, oh my gosh, I mean, you want to talk about panic attacks, those,
Right.
but the road to authenticity, which I think is a word that it gets bandied about a lot, but the road to authentically becoming who I am purposed to be on this planet and live that out is, it's going to require some sacrifice, and it's going to require some courage.
Yeah.
And ironically, I hear myself say those words to you right now, and it still feels foreign. There's still a voice back here that goes, "You're not courageous," and I've
Wow. Yeah.
learned how to ignore those voices. But that's why I say every day, like every day I have to show up to life with the intention of, I'm going to continue my level of self-awareness, and I'm going to continue to make choices and be intentional in a way that continues for me to be able to be a positive force on this planet while I'm on this planet,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And so, I mean, there was that internal dialogue, but then there was also the external evaluation of what is the fruit of my life,
Yeah.
and am I satisfied with that? Does that align with this understanding that I'm having about who I am? And if it's not, then there's some major changes that need to be made. And so for you, it was, I'm going to work with a coach that's going to help me identify those things and go down the path. So one last question I want to hit, and we'll wrap up with this one. So a lot of what we've talked about. I mean, you've been doing this, for a while, and you've been walking with people in this process, and certainly you're not a finished product, but you're certainly further down the road, maybe than definitely further down the road than somebody who's starting out. So for somebody who listens to you and says, man, I would love to have that kind of clarity, I would love to have that kind of authenticity, I don't even know where to start. What would you suggest to them?
Well, first I would say, piggybacking off of your summation of what I said, I would simply add, where it became easy to start for me was those objectifiable, almost measurable
Mm,
things that were playing out in my life because of the broken behavioral patterns due to broken thought patterns and belief patterns. Those things became more painful than the pain of making a change. And so it
mhm.
became easy, like, okay, yeah, this will be hard, but it won't be as painful as continuing down this road of just hiding all the time and trying to put somebody out there that hopefully people like or whatever. Um, where to start? I think on just being honest with yourself it's probably the first place to start. Like even as opposed to like giving you like, oh, here's a great book, it's a place to start. I would say to actually start is letting yourself sit with that honesty, because it will not feel good.
Mm.
How long have I been living this way? What other behavioral patterns or thought patterns do I have that are really kind of reinforcing this bent towards non-authentic lifestyle, or something that's not true. I can't remember the word you used, but it's a good word. About
I have lots of good words.
an
I
identity
don't remember
that's
either.
a false identity,
Sure.
which I would
Yeah.
say is probably like your ego. You used a different word. So just allowing yourself to sit with that honesty for more than a minute,
Mm.
knowing you won't die, even it might feel like a hot poker's coming through your chest at some point. And then finding someone you absolutely trust and feel absolutely safe with, to be able to express that to another person, because there's something that becomes so real. One, if you're writing it down in a journal, hey, I don't think I like myself, and I think I put on a face, and I think I'm being pretty unauthentic with everyone around me, and it kind of really looks like I'm lying a lot, even though I'm
Mhm.
not intentionally lying. That's one level of, oh, this is real. It's a whole nother level to be able to express that to another human being, and for that other human being not to judge you, and for it just to be able to be spoken. There's something really powerful that happens when things are spoken out. I think it's probably, depending on what tradition people are at, I think it's one of the real powers of confession
Mhm.
within the broader Christian tradition, and other traditions as well. So I think that's a great place to start. And I would even go as far as to say, if you don't feel like you have a friend or a family member that you can actually trust and you feel safe, a therapist, um, a counselor, a pastor, doesn't really matter what their title is, as long as it's someone that you feel like you're in a safe space with when you talk.
That's
It's
great.
probably the first place to start. And then there's lots of
Wow.
places. Talk to a
Right.
therapist, look for someone you trust, talk to a pastor, look for a coach that you can trust. Um, these are great next steps.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Brad, I mean, I'm grateful because you've been that person for me over the few years that we have known each other. And I think one of the things that I really have taken away from our relationship is that faith ultimately, and this is something you would say over and over again, faith is ultimately the conviction that no matter what process you go through to become the best version of yourself, you'll be okay. You know,
Yeah.
you'll be like that. God is
Yeah.
with you in that. And so I know for me, that's, in the challenging times that I've faced over the last few years, the changes that I need to make, the changes I still need to make. That's something that I carry with me
I love it.
through
Yeah.
for our relationship. So I want to say thank you for serving us today, and dropping a ton of nuggets and truth bombs, and so we're gonna marinate over that here for the next little bit. But God bless you, and we're grateful for your time.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. It's great to see you.